Welcome back to Made Up of Wires. We're decompiling Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Or should we, I can't disconnect it. I don't know if my cable's long enough. Should we decompile the infamous Zip 250 USB powered? I just got that. Very excited about it. One of my other projects deals with I/O for various block devices, and I didn't have a Zip 250. I had a Zip 100 that I have sitting dutifully on my desk as well. Oh, that one I can unplug. That one's not mounted at the moment. A beautiful Zip 100. One of my favorite devices, I think, of all time. The design of it reminds me of some 1990s Japanese anime. Brings me joy just having it on my desk. The translucent blue plastic. Fantastic. If it was clear, might be a little better, but I'll take the translucent blue. Anyway, I think we'll focus on Symphony of the Night tonight. And I'm feeling a little under the weather, so it's going to be a little short, and we're going to do something a little easy. Anchovy Gravity Well says, man, those zip drives sucked. I had a parallel port one back in the late 90s. That was not ideal. Very slow. I always like zip disks better than LS120, even though LS120 was way more convenient. Just the industrial design of zip was awesome to me. Melted Copper says, just make the 3 characters playable. I'll see what I can do about it. Not today, for sure. Yeah, like I said, my head is a little cottony. Woke up, not waking up. Woke up, went back to bed, and woke up again. And so I think today we're going to do something a little easy, but I think it's a valuable foundation for other stuff in Clock Tower, and we're going to keep working on Clock Tower. And so what is that? I've mentioned before several times that the way that entity IDs work on the PSP is different. And 90-ish% of the time, a global variable will be used and given the entity ID. And then we have to go back and figure out what that global variable is and what entity it maps to. So let's map all those entities, and then we don't have to do it again. And that'll make subsequent things a little easier. And so we have NZ1 load and init entity IDs. Those are going to be the functions that are responsible for that. And we should be able to get through those pretty quickly. Trevor Grant, Sifa are on his screen but not playable. Unfortunately, they probably don't have all of the sprites necessary. So if you could work within the constraints of those sprites, maybe it would work. So those are in Coliseum, right? We could look. Let's see. I've not played through either the PSP or Saturn Maria playthroughs. I've never played through a Richter playthrough, actually, either. I did start a Richter playthrough a couple months ago and just wasn't feeling it. Like, it's just such a different game. Let's see what assets are available. So I have a script that I use to share. So we're going to be in stage. What stage is Colosseum? I'm going to be going a little slow today. Colosseum is airy, of course. So let's look at what airy sprites do we have. Is it Colosseum? No, Colosseum it's reverse Colosseum. Oh, we don't have any of those sprites pulled. If I remember, I will think about mapping those sprites. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have anything mapped yet for that. Hey, Mitri. The Sifa Trevor and oh, who's the other one? Sorry, going slow today. Grant, the Grant sprites from I think it's Reverse Catacombs, right? Is that where the There's no Game Genie code to play those guys. The if you're familiar with the project at all, sometime last year, Zianimo, who is the leader of the project, he ported the PSP Maria to the PlayStation, and that was a pretty huge undertaking and relies on a lot of things. Had to replace Richter as the secondary character just to make it a little more straightforward to do. And there were people at the time claiming that back in the 90s there were Game Genie codes to do that. There were never Game Genie codes to play as Maria in the PlayStation 1 version of Symphony of the Night. It would be even more, because there's no logic or anything like that for a playable character for those. It would be a significant amount of work, not intractable, and it might be something that could be laid on top of the existing Richter code with some sprite swaps and things like that, depending on how the characters look. But my guess is we just don't have enough sprites. So we'd have enough sprites for the set of attacks that they do in that fight. But is that enough to actually get through the game? That they might not have enough animation. So you could, I guess, pad out the animation with what's there, and it might look a little janky. Oh, they're an RBO. Oh. Yeah, we definitely don't have RBO 0 imported yet, because I've been the one primarily importing bosses. Other people don't seem to want to work on bosses. Anyway, let's get back to what I was going to do, which was looking at init entities and NZ1 load. These are mostly the same. So these are like constructor functions in GCC, but when the PSP loads the overlay, we don't get things at set memory addresses like we do on the PlayStation. So instead, the address of each of these load functions for each stage is exported. And we actually know the symbol names of these because there's a ps.elf file on the PSP disk that has symbols in it with each of these names, NZ1 load being the name, and it has the address to the function that is this. And so we know what the entry point for each of the stages is, and then this acts kind of as a constructor for this stage. And NZ1 load and init entity IDs together will give us the offsets of all of the entity IDs, because what init entity IDs does is just assigns the correct entity ID to each of the globals. It's odd. I really don't understand why it exists, but it does. We're looking at PSP. And I don't know why these are put in NZ1 as opposed to NZ1_PSP. Eventually, I guess they'll live there because the NZ1_PSP directory will go away. But that is the way it is. And NZ1 load should just be a handful of function calls and maybe some assignments. It should be pretty easy. Maybe easy enough to even do without going to decomp.me. So when you put it in reptile mode, Melted Copper, and everybody is reptile, does it matter who you select, or will you always just be reptile? I should go back and play old Mortal Kombats. I definitely liked them in the 90s. I don't think I ever liked Mortal Kombat better than Street Fighter 2. But I liked it enough and definitely pumped a lot of quarters into it. Okay, so a pretty straightforward function, like I said, some assignments and some function calls. We're copying our overlay into the appropriate place. We could probably do size of NZ1 overlay. We probably know the type of that. Let's look at one of these. So these are, the init function is going to be mostly the same. We don't have some of the additional data that is usually there, or I shouldn't say usually. Often there's data that's there for scripts and other stage-specific things, which is why this can't just be shared. It also can't just be shared because it's it uses specific symbols for each one. I'm gonna have to pull each of these. So these are going to be layout entities. Probably arrays, but it doesn't make a difference. NZ1, this is going to be OVL export. OVL export gives us the appropriate prefix. We use a macro there so that we can share code between different stages, and it gets the appropriate prefix. And overlay is going to be an overlay type. And it looks like PFN entity update is a shared file that will give us the correct thing here. And this is actually going to be OVL exported as well. We don't have the PFN entity update declaration. Is that true? Yeah, we do. Did I spell it wrong? I see, we don't have this one. So just grabbing these types. And the only other thing that may be a little odd is that init entity IDs should be static, which might may or may not result in something slightly different than expected. And we're getting... Oh, I did this as a PlayStation decomp instead of a PSP decomp, so let me fix that. It will never work on the PlayStation. It was actually pretty close, kind of surprised. Memcopy is a built-in on GCC, and so it looks like a function, but the compiler will just generate the instructions for it inline. And since we're working on MD1, let's fix that here. Tell me more about e-boots. I'm not familiar with e-boots. Yeah, I thought these were going to be arrays. They're in other files, they're declared differently than that. PSP eBoot is basically the conversion process people could use to make PS1 games bootable on the PSP. And so when they were selling things on the eShop, for example, were they wrappers around ISOs, or were they just the ISO and the PSP could load the ISO directly? So we're going to do something. We're going to use the PFN entity update header, which is going to give us a bunch of these common stage declarations. So we should just need these. I think it was the wrapper situation. We need... What do we need here? So we didn't have the overlay declaration. Implicit conversion from a struct. All right, so it looks like, let's treat them as pointers. And then we'll put the reference back in there. And again, got to get rid of the include ASM. And that should work. So Eldridge says they were looking into making an e-boot for randomizer output. Oh, that's interesting. Does the PS1 version of Soten run better on the PSP than it does on the PlayStation? You could They did sell I'm almost positive that they sold the PS1 ISO on the eShop, because I remember that was my first introduction to Symphony of the Night, was deciding whether I was going to get the Castlevania X Chronicles or just the Symphony of the Night game, and I didn't know at the time which one to get, and it seemed like getting Rondo Blood and the Rondo remake and all that made sense. Now knowing, I tend to play the PlayStation 1 version more. Yep. That's what I thought. It didn't run worse or better. So it still had the same slowdown around like the life up render. Is it only the Xbox 360 version that fixes that? Huh. Is there a branch for the randomizer or anything that that has those attempts? That might be interesting to look at. Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the eBoot process at all. It's kind of, I wonder if they would have been able to hook into eBoot from within the game, because it seems like they did a lot of work to stub out a lot of the PlayStation 1 SDK, and so if they could have just relied on eBoot instead, it seems like there might have been some benefit there. I guess then there's some PSP stuff like saving and other things like but you could do that through eBoot or through the backward compatibility. I don't know. I wonder why they did change graphics. I don't know. All right, so what we're going to get here with this scratch is we're going to get all of the globals that we don't have names for, and we're going to see in some cases that possibly these are out of order, or it seemed like they were anyway. I don't see anything out of order though. Why were we getting some of these that weren't necessarily in the same order? But we should be able to take these. So these are the PSP versions of these, and what we want to do is give them the same names as their PS1 counterparts. I've not looked in. I've done this before, but I've not looked into it closely. Basically, we're zipping this enum with all of these globals, and so we have to find the offset of enum 17 here, and we could go backwards through the explode puff or the other way. Either way is fine, and we have to map all these addresses. And we're going to look at the NZ1 header. What I've thought about in the last couple of months is the first 16 of these, so through Entity Dummy 10, are, I believe, identical in every stage. And this supports that idea to a certain extent by starting at 11. And I'm not sure, I would have to go back and look to see if those other ones, if they're ever used as globals or not. But maybe we should be taking those entities and putting them in a common enum apart from the stage and starting the stage enum at hex 11 or 17, because that seems to be where it starts. so let's get going with this. So I think what I'm going to do is I have both of these side by side. You don't get to see it, but I do. And I'll probably start with comments here. What's the best way to do this? What I need to do is basically map each of these and then take them back to the symbol table and create variables for each of them. And it's going to be kind of a pain, but we'll get through it. There's a lot of them, more so than most stages. But as always, there's nothing to it but to do it. It would be nice, and I don't have the ability. I don't think I can do a columnar selection in decomp.me. So I won't. But I'm just going to do a few at a time, and then eventually we'll get through them all. And each of these is going to be prefixed with DPSP. And so I'm going to take this. I don't need the values for the symbol table. But I'm going to go to the symbol table. And this seems like something that would be easily scriptable. And I probably should write a regular expression to do this replacement. That seems like it would be something nice to do. So let's start at the beginning. We're going to have some number of spaces. Do I care? I don't really care about the number of spaces. Then we're going to have D, ESP, E, followed by not spaces. Ooh, am I not going to get a... Followed by a space. Then we're going to have D, PSP, U. And as we learned the other day, I can do hex characters. Followed by a space, and then I don't care about the rest of this to the end. And so what do we want to be on that line? We want 1 equal to hex prefix 2, semicolon. And I don't need the G. G does the replacement multiple times on a single line. And that should be that. Yeah, so that will give us the right format. And I'm going to have extra spaces in here. And so what we're going to get... what's going on here? Oh, drat. So every time I do that, I also need to go back up here and make sure that I have those declarations as well. Like, a lot of work. A lot of bookkeeping. That's all it is bookkeeping. I could, now that I have those as symbols and I don't have this decompiled, I could just take the time, and maybe that's what I should do. That's probably what I should do. Is not even care about this scratch at all. Just do that mapping, edit the symbol table, and then I'll regenerate this scratch. Regenerate the assembly, and then we'll get all the symbols for free. So I'm just going to keep doing that. We're going to go up to boss doors, and the next one is going to be boss door trigger. And I'm actually not going to put the DPSP. I'll update my regular expression to do the right thing. I'll just look for the E there. So that'll make it a little easier, a little faster. I will eventually have to generate all of the externs will get generated for us as well. So that's good. We can be really lazy for this one. That's the kind of day I feel like having. So breakable debris. We're going to have Fleaman. I do want to look at Fleaman again and see Fleaman in the clock tower did not match Fleaman in the Long Library, and there's Fleaman and Armored Fleaman in the Long Library. Alright, so we need all these but breakable debris. Oh, and now I need to add that D_PSP to my replacement. And there we go. And we just keep going, and this should be pretty straightforward, hopefully no complications here, unless I get one of these wrong, and then they will be hell to pay later. Why is Vandal Sword creating a Phantom Skull? That's what will happen later. Surprised that we did Cloak Knight. Seems like months ago now. And Cloak Knight didn't end up using these globals, I guess. Pretty sure I did the PSP version at the same time. Alright, so we ended at Phantom Skull. Let's grab all of these. And to just illustrate what I'm saying, when we look at the assembly here, we see all these D_PSP symbols in here. And now that I've updated the symbol table, I can just split. Big splat PSP EU STNZ1. When this gets split again, all of those DPSP symbols are going to be gone, and they're going to be replaced with the nice ones that we just created. Unfortunately, if those values were used anywhere, we'll get compilation errors, and we should probably check that just to make sure. I'm gonna touch because we don't have a good dependency mapping right now necessarily for the PSP. I'm gonna touch all the C files and for Clock Tower and build everything again, and this will tell us if anything was relying on those D_PSP, and there wasn't anything, so I think we're okay. All right, so we got through Harpy Kick. So let's get the next set. And yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure that I went through all the Harpy stuff on the PSP as well. And these weren't used. It's not clear to me why these got moved into globals from just being static values. I had a few theories, but none of them panned out. One of my theories was that they were always global values, and that this was something the compiler did to generate the global static values, but that I couldn't get that to reconcile. I was at Harpy Kick class. I should mark somehow where I was. And this has aligned with this enum, so we're at the right place. Everything is synchronized. so I haven't screwed up too much. Why didn't I get this one? Oh, Spike's damage was already done. Alright, so I didn't need to do that one. How many more of these are there? All of them. So, spike parts. So we need spikes. And I think, like I said, this... I don't like to necessarily overly automate, mostly again for fear of like what is creative and what is not from a copyright perspective. What can we do and what can't we do to be legally safe? In this case, this is not. I don't find this to be a creative endeavor whatsoever. So I don't see an issue with automating it. The creative endeavor was giving these names to begin with, not the mapping of those to the globals. And yep, this again synchronizes just fine. So I'm not worried about the decomp.me scratch matching. Because when I split this again and create a new scratch, all the symbol names will be correct, and we'll get all of the externs as well. And again, I'm not feeling the best today. I have a kind of cotton heady, so this is the kind of work that I think is good for a day like this. Not a lot of critical thinking necessary, just making some progress. Last set. I'm one off. Okay, so now I'm in trouble. Because now I am one off. Up to... Oh, that's why I'm one off. Because I literally put it in the wrong place. Alright, so... Bridge trigger. Don't give Puff Opaque and Bridge Trigger the same name. Or the same value. Unknown ID 13 should have been the tell. But I was one off, but I missed it. Okay. Last set. Nope, that's not what I wanted to. Need my regular expressions. Now we're gonna, yeah, we are gonna build all. Again, this might, there might be some issue here. Harpy Dagger. Ooh. Rat, I have 2 of them. So let's figure out what might be going on there. Harpy Flame. Harpy Dagger, and then Harpy. First one should be Harpy, it looks like. Outline, flames, pieces, Harpy. All right, so that compiled fine. We have our updated assembly, and now all of these should have named symbols in them. And it looks fine. So I'm going to copy that. Copy that. Roger, roger. We're going to delete this one. Create a new one. And this matches already, and we get all of the externs. And now we don't have any of those automatic symbols. What I do want to do is, now what we will do is get rid of this. This is going to be a regular expression as well, because we want the whole thing. We're going to match everything up to the... This is going to be a separate match, not a... I guess it could be a space or a semicolon. Either one is fine. So that'll get all these down here as well. And what we want to call them is EID. And that will be the first match, and then we'll put the second match there as well. We want this to be lazy, so we put a question mark there to make it lazy. Lazy just means try to match as little while still matching the whole expression. Usually regular expressions are greedy, which means match as much as possible. And you need to know what the correct replacement marker is, and apparently it's $sign here. So we can take this, and we should be able to put that in place. We're going to make that static. It's only going to be called here. Get rid of this. And this should be fine. And so what's nice about this is we have all of our extern entity IDs now. I don't have to do this one by one anymore as they come up. So I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to put them in the NZ1 header. I'm just going to replace everything that was there because I know that everything's going to be in this list. And I am going to rebuild everything just to make sure. And that all works fine. So, ooh, you hear that? That's nice. We don't get a lot of rain here, so anytime we do, it's a pleasant day. But now, yeah, all of these symbols are matched. Like I said, this is something that I would be okay automating, and I think we know what the entity or the init entity ID function is. That symbol existed already, and so the structure of that function is relatively well known. It just loads the address of a global and then stores a constant. And so how do you interpret this? Well, we're using the add immediate unsigned to add some immediate to 0 and then store that in A0. What's in A0? The address that was before it. And I think you could even oh, actually, I read that backwards. We're storing the constant in A0 and then doing the store on this line here. So you could use a heuristic. You don't have to actually interpret these instructions. We know what they do visually. So breaking this into 3 lines, making sure that the instruction follow the format that you expect, ADDIU, LUI, SW, and then grabbing the symbol name to get the address for that global. I think would be a pretty good addition. Getting some nice thunder. This is mostly bookkeeping, but it's necessary bookkeeping, and it will make the other work later a little easier. Like I said, I'm not feeling the best today, so I think that's where I'm going to end it. Not hugely complicated, but just, again, some bookkeeping to make life easier later on. Something that's easy to do when you're not feeling up to doing much else. You can go to soten.z.dev to learn more about the Symphony Night Decompilation project. Thanks, Eldritch, Mead Tree, Roaming, Melted Copper. Melted Copper, I'll see what I can do about about getting Grant and the others in there for you. I hope everybody has a great day. Entropy Gravity Well, always good to have you. And I'll catch you all next week. Adios.